It's really wonderful to see everybody joining our Zoom room today. Welcome. Really great to have you here today. We are going to be having a wonderful time together. I'm excited talking about leadership and what that looks like for you in particular in the new year in 2025. So we are pretty much at the top of the hour. So what I'm going to do is dive in to today's webinar and just really excited to have you here. Welcome. So, hello, welcome everybody to today's webinar. We are talking today about leadership for women lawyers in 2025. For those of you who are new to me, my name is Paula Price. I am a former lawyer turned certified executive coach. I work exclusively for lawyers. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Mostly, I'm interested in you and whether you are finding yourself in the right place. And my guess is that if you're here, absolutely, you will know you're in the right place. If you are a woman lawyer, you might find that you're at a crossroads in your career, right? You might be already in a leadership role, right? You might be a partner at your firm, you might have a senior title in your organization. And what you're looking for today is inspiration, some ideas for how to develop your leadership further in the new year. You might be at an earlier stage of your practice. You might not yet be in a position of leadership, but you're looking forward and thinking about what this could look like for you, how you can start developing skills today that will take you to the position that you want to be in the future. You might be a senior associate, you're on the verge of partnership, and you're figuring out what that looks like in your practice, how to take on more of a leadership role within your firm. You might also be in a position where you have a young family or you're just returning from a maternity leave. I often work with lawyers who are transitioning back into work, and one of the components that they're looking at is how to balance their professional life and their personal life and how to do so from a position of leadership. So that might be you. And then, generally speaking, what I find is a common theme with almost all of the lawyers that I work with is that there's this sense of wanting to be in control. So, regardless of your title, your position, you're in a busy law practice, and what you're really looking for is a way to feel more proactive instead of feeling like you're reactive. So, these are all themes that we're likely to touch on during the course of today's session. And mostly, what I'm hoping for each of you is that you have an opportunity to do a deep dive into your own practice and to think about leadership from your perspective and what it is that will take you to the next level in the new year. So, I mentioned that I'm a coach. I used to practice. I was a commercial litigator for over a dozen years in a large full service firm in Vancouver. For the past 8 years, I've been coaching lawyers, so working with lawyers at all stages, from students at law school who are trying to get a job at a law firm, who want some help with networking and interviewing, and those early stage steps, to lawyers who are just starting out, junior lawyers, junior associates, to mid-level lawyers, to more senior lawyers. So it really does cover the full spectrum. And so it's interesting because you hear from more senior lawyers about their experiences leading their teams. Then you also hear the stories from the more junior lawyers and the challenges that they're having. So I'm lucky in the sense that I get to hear all of it. And the work that I do, of course, is confidential with respect to each lawyer. So I really do have an opportunity to see how everybody is experiencing their practice and find ways to support them within their practice. So I do coaching one-to-one. I do coaching in groups. I lead a group of women lawyers in a 6-month program, which I will tell you a little bit more about at the end of today's webinar. I also do speaking for law firms, bar associations, other organizations who want somebody to come in and talk about practice-related topics. I also have a podcast. It's called the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. You may have found me through the podcast. And that is where I share as much as I can in terms of tips and tricks and tips and strategies and themes that come up in my coaching practice that I think are helpful to other lawyers. So with that, I am going to dive into the substance of today's webinar, which is all about, as I mentioned, leadership in the new year. So today we're going to be doing very much a workshop style webinar. I highly encourage you to have a pen and paper handy because the way that I'm approaching this session is as though you and I were having a conversation with me as your coach and me trying to help you figure out what your strengths are, where you see the limits, and where you want to go in the new year. So this is how I'm approaching the conversation. So what I'd love for you to do for your experience of today is to be thinking about how these questions relate to you, how everything applies to you in your practice. We're going to cover really three different topics. The first is leadership in 2024. I love the end of the calendar year because I think it's the best opportunity to look back on the year and to think about everything that has happened, the wins that you've had, the areas where you've struggled, where you've had some challenges, and what you have learned that you can apply going forward. And a calendar year is just a really nice way to wrap it up. If you're on a billable hour system, then you're probably at the end of your target and you'll start again in January. So it's almost like you're hitting the refresh button. I think we also often approach a new year with a fresh slate, a feeling of starting everything new. And so this is just a really good time for everybody to reflect. And kudos to all of you for being here today. We are at the beginning of December, so chances are you're kind of diving into that holiday season where things get really busy, right? You've got a lot of deadlines at work to wrap up before the year end. You also have social and family engagements. So I'm glad that you're able to carve out this time to spend it with me to reflect on you in your practice. So the themes we'll cover today, leadership in 2024. We're going to talk about your wins. We're going to talk about your strategies, your strengths, how you have led during the course of this year, and how that has created the success that you have currently. We're also going to talk about limits. So that's going to be the first part. Then we're going to talk about what you want in 2025. And I would love to frame this around you having a breakthrough year. And we'll talk about that more when we get to that part of today's discussion. And then finally, leadership in 2025, who you must be and who you must become in order to achieve the breakthrough year or whatever results you're seeking to achieve in the new year. I hope to have time for questions and takeaways if you would like to share those. I'm inviting you to use the chat. There's also a Q&A function. I've turned that off for today because I wasn't able to access Q&A using my slides, and I plan to have the slides up. So feel free to use the chat to let me know anything along the way. If you have questions, comments, please put them there. And I've got my chat box open so that I can keep an eye on any feedback from you. So please feel free to participate. I'd love to hear from you. So we're going to explore today leadership at your next level. Now, one of the questions I posed on the earlier slide is who you must become. And there's a couple of ways of thinking about this. And the reason I put the come part in brackets is because there's really who you are already, and then what changes you might need to make. And if you look the word become up in the dictionary, at least the definition that I chose was from the Collins Online Dictionary, which is to come to be, develop, or grow into. So when it comes to leadership and we're thinking ahead to 2025, there's a part of you that is going to be different in that becoming, right? That process. But what I would also love for you to consider is that you are already the leader that you're aspiring to be. And I put this picture of the very famous statue of David on the slide and the quote from Michelangelo, right? He was asked, how did you come to create this extraordinary sculpture? And his response was this: it's simple. I just remove everything that is not David. So for each of you, I would invite you to think about leadership and who you aspire to be as a leader. And it's as though you are that statue, right? You're not David, you are you. But there are parts of you, right? It's almost like there's that marble that is encasing the statue, who you are beneath that. And we want to chip away some of those layers to reveal who you are at your core. So you'll notice on the slide here, I've got be, do, have versus do, have, be. And often when we approach growth or we look at goals, we think of it from the do, have, be model, right? You do the thing to have the result in order to be the person or to be happy. So you do the hard work, you study really hard to have the degree, to have the job, to have the position, to have the title in order to be successful, happy, satisfied. And what I'm inviting you to consider today is that we're going to flip it around. So we're starting with be, right? Who do you need to be as a leader in order to do the things that you want to do as a leader and then have the results as a result of being that person and taking those actions? So it's a different way of looking at it. And you won't be surprised to hear I spend a lot of time in different coaching circles learning from other coaches. And this is a theme that I've noticed recently. I was at a conference the other week for a group of coaches, and a couple of the speakers talked about this concept, right? One called it ontology, or an ontological approach to coaching, which is that focus on the being state. And another coach coined beology, right? So not a true real word, but this idea of who you're being and the impact that that has in terms of the actions that you take and the effects that that creates within your practice and within your life. And really important for today is I'm going to be teaching you how to think, not what to think. So we are truly in an age where information is so easily accessible, right? You can plug into AI a question and you will receive within seconds reams of information that you can use. And the challenge that I see is taking the information and implementing it through action. So, what I'm most concerned about isn't telling you how to be a leader. What I'm most interested in for you is helping you see what leadership can be for you and helping you take action in that direction. So, we're going to be looking at a lot of questions. There's a lot of how here. And what I invite you to think about is how we're approaching this problem, this question, right? Leadership in 2025, and how you can take what you're learning today and apply it in the future. So we're going to start out with wins. Now, the funny thing with webinars is I can't see anybody. So I'm going to assume that everybody is doing well, that you've got your pen and paper handy, and that you're ready to participate and dive in and to reflect on and make note of your leadership wins this year. Now, don't limit yourself to the wins that you've had in your professional work, in your legal practice, at your organization, wherever you are practicing, whatever level you happen to be at. I would love for you to record those wins. So start noting those on a piece of paper. I would also invite you to think about leadership in your personal life. I know for myself this year, as I was reflecting on these questions, as I was preparing for today, I had a number of wins in both categories. And if I had to weigh one category over the other, I would say that because of events that were happening in my personal life this year, my focus on leadership was more in the nature of growth as a leader within my family context than it was professionally. Professionally, there were still achievements, there were milestones, but if I look at where there was the most growth, the most transformation, it was in the personal sphere. So for you, I would invite you to think about both your personal and your professional life, how you show up as a leader in both of those, and what you feel like your accomplishments were this year. Now, in some cases, your wins are going to be very personal, right? These are going to be things that affect you. So when I have self here is the first item on the slide. So what could that be? I mean, this could be increased self-awareness, metacognition. What we're doing here today is a lot of metacognition. It is one of your executive functioning skills. It is the ability for you to see yourself as though from a watcher position. So we're doing a lot of that here today, and it's increasing your awareness about who you are and how you operate. That in itself can be an accomplishment, right? Or it can lead you to other accomplishments within your practice, having a greater sense of your self-concept. So each of us has, consciously or not, a concept of who we are. And so living into that, being aware of who you are, how you describe yourself, define yourself, um, and doing that from a place of growth, the way that you talk to yourself. Maybe you've got improvements in that internal narrative. So I know for a lot of lawyers that I work with, there is this running dialogue, and it's very harsh, it's very critical, and it prevents them from doing things because they're so worried about how they're going to be so hard on themselves. So it might be that you've changed the nature of the way that you speak to yourself, which interestingly will often have effects on how you engage with others. Um, Other areas in terms of self-leadership, it could be motivation. So finding new ways to motivate yourself. If you struggle with procrastination, for example, this can be an area where you may have made strong inroads to helping yourself get motivated even when you don't want to. Discipline, so that ability to follow through on the promises that you make to yourself, and then confidence too, right? That is something that comes up a lot in the work that I do with lawyers, especially with women lawyers who are um, stretching themselves, who are entering a new level, whether it's leadership or a new challenge. And so developing that sense of self-confidence and also that confidence in your work. Now, it may also be that your leadership wins are more in the nature of, what we would look at as team leading, right? And this is where we often go when we think of leadership. So if you have a team and you're mentoring and you're giving work, you are delegating, you're training others, you're giving feedback on the work that they're doing. You might be leading a group, so fostering cohesion within the group, managing the dynamic of multiple players, and also modeling the kind of leadership, the kind of conduct that you would like to see among the people that are working with you, for you, under your leadership. If you look at an organization, there may be some accomplishments that you have made within the realm of your organization. So it could be that you've created a vision or you've managed to persuade others to adopt your vision. You might be implementing new systems or ways of doing things. Now, this could be an organization where you are a part of it, if you're a part of a law firm or an agency or a company. It may also be it's you running the organization. It's your firm. It is your business. And so depending on the role that you have, the accomplishments that you have may be different. So for example, if you're within a large organization and you're making your voice heard, that would be something that maybe you would be putting as an accomplishment for the year versus if you're leading your own practice, then it might be different, right? It might be that you're hitting certain milestones or have certain reach or getting results for your clients in a different way. So everyone's going to have a different um, set of results. And so here are the exercises to do it for yourself. Um, and then finally, community, right? Are there ways in which you feel like you've created an impact? You've done something that serves the community this year that you feel proud of. So here, the goal really for this exercise is simply to highlight for yourself some of the wins that you've had over the course of the year. Now, the next question that we're going to dive into is your strengths. So I have a number of questions on the slide, and this is where we start to dive into you personally and how you're leading and what's working, right? So again, going back to that idea of metacognition, right? If you were the watcher of you, right? If you were looking at you and saying, okay, she's done a really great job this year. Look at all these things she's accomplished. How did she do it? And what I'd love for us to focus on first, there's a number of questions on the slide. Now, I should mention, I will circulate a recording of today's webinar along with a copy of the slides. So you don't have to write down all these questions. You can always come back to them for reference. But we're going to start here with identifying your winning success strategies. Now, Tracy Goss, I refer to her on the slide, is a coach. She wrote a book called The Last Word on Power. And one of the fascinating things about this book is that Tracy talks about how each of us has winning strategies that allow us to achieve a certain level of success. So this book that she wrote, The Last Word on Power, is designed to help high achieving leaders. So people who have already accomplished a great deal in their field. It is to help them move from the level they are now past, let's say, a plateau into a next level of leadership. And part of that means giving up on their winning strategies, so strategies that they have used to achieve a certain level of success in order to reach a next level of success. So you can see where we're going today. First, we're going to be identifying your strengths. We're going to look at them. We're going to explore them a little bit more deeply. And we're also going to be looking at how they've been holding you back. So we're not there yet. We're starting out with what are these success strategies? So I would invite you to look at your list of accomplishments and think about what strategies you've been using in order to achieve those successes. So I'm going to give you some examples, some brainstorming, but again, I'd invite you to write down your own examples. So it could involve gathering information, setting clear goals for yourself, making a plan, following through on your plan, controlling the outcome. Uh, that sometimes happens by being the person who takes on the different parts of the project and does a lot of work. So working hard is often a success strategy. Um, your strategy might be to prioritize your work, right? The projects that you have made successful, you've done so because you've made them a priority. You may have done that as a priority over yourself, right? Over your personal time, rest time, whatever that might look like for you. It might be your willingness to change strategies. So maybe you've started in one direction, you realize that that was not going to get you to where you wanted to be, and so you are willing to change course. It might involve asking for help. So that could be asking for assistance, say, from someone who's ahead of you, right? If it might be somebody who has professional expertise in an area that you don't, so you might have asked them for help. It could also be asking for help in the sense of delegating, right? Saying, there's a lot on my plate, and so I'm going to ask somebody else to help me with these other things. Um, it could be lower standards. So sometimes the way that you get to achieve something great is by lowering your standards in other areas, right? If we try to do everything perfectly, which many of us love to do, it means that we're just not going to get as far as we could if we were to lower our standards in certain areas to free up time and space to focus on other areas. Your strategy might be focusing on trying to avoid negative outcomes, right? So you might be able to predict that a certain course of action is going to lead to negative consequences, and you're able to see that at an early stage, and so you can avoid it. You might find that one of your winning strategies is being able to work on multiple projects at any given time. So these are some ideas, and these are by no means, by no means an exhaustive list of strategies. The idea here is simply to get your mind running and thinking about for you what your winning strategies might be. So that brings us to the next question, which is what is great about your winning strategies? So part of the reason why we get attached to our strategies is because we like them, right? So if you think about your winning strategies, what's great about them, they may be consistent, right? When you apply these strategies, you've applied them for years, you get consistent and predictable results. It may be that you have control, right? If you apply these strategies, you know that you are controlling the outcomes. They may be measured. You know that these steps will take you step by step to where you need to be. They are reliable. They are effective. So I would invite you to think about what is great about your strategies. Now, your strategies will be different, likely or perhaps from the ones that I suggested. So what is great about them might be different. And at any given time, I'll just extend the invitation. Feel free to put in the chat if you want to share some of your strategies or what's great about them. I'd love to hear from you. So the next question is, what have they helped you achieve? We have just done a laundry list of accomplishments from 2024. Then we looked at your winning strategies, what's great about them. I'm going to ask you to take an even bigger step back now and look more broadly over the course of your lifetime, what your winning strategies have helped you achieve. My guess is that they have helped you achieve academic success. They have helped you achieve the jobs that you want, the titles that you want, the work that you want. They have perhaps made you a good employee. Your clients might really love you for it. Your colleagues might really love you for it. Your family, your friends might really love you for the things that you bring to the table. So the question here, what have they helped you achieve? a certain degree of success, a certain degree of approval. You may have a really great reputation. And so I would invite you to think about all the wonderful things that these strengths have helped you achieve. And as we're discussing this, I'm thinking, okay, we all know that we're also going to be talking about some of the limitations on these strengths. And so the idea here isn't to say, okay, these are all my strengths. These are the things that I like about them. And now I have to change everything. That is not where we're going. I think what we want to do is to reflect on your strengths, to take an inventory of your strategies, what's great about them, how they are helping you move forward. And we want to celebrate that about you, right? We want to celebrate all of this. And when we're looking at this next level of leadership, what we're going to do is we're going to decide how to build on the existing strengths and what shifts we're going to make in order to reach that next level of leadership. So just wanted to make that point as we move forward. Now, this next question, who do you get to be when you implement those strategies? This is where it starts to get a little bit tricky, right? So who do you get to be when you implement these strategies? Well, maybe you get to be dependable, right? People know they can rely on you. You get to be successful. You get to be trusted. You get to be consistent. You get to be a doer, an achiever. Maybe you get to be liked. So think about all the things that you get to be when you implement the winning strategies. So I'm going to give you a minute just to think about who you get to be. Then we're going to move on to the next slide, which is where we're going to start looking at some of the limitations of the winning strategies. Okay, so now we're moving on to the limits. And on the one hand, we have these winning strategies that help us get to that place that you are now, right? And the issue here is if we want to move past the leadership version of you 2024 into the next level, 2025, what do we need to do differently? Now, remember, this is a mix of new and existing. So if we go back to that statue of David, we're carving away, right? Some of the excess, some of the marble that is standing between you and the outside world to reveal more of who you are. So what we want to figure out here is how are your current strategies, the ones that you're using, limiting you? And in what ways are you stuck? So some of the limits that you might be facing, if you're using hard work as one of your strategies, right? If you are prioritizing work, you are doing the work, you are putting work ahead of other things, then what you might find is that that can lead to burnout, right? I think this is really common among lawyers. Exhaustion, it can lead to resentment, right? If you find that you're taking on more and more and it's creating a lot of pressure on you that maybe others are not taking on the same amount of or number of responsibilities. It can lead to resentment. It might also lead to feeling trapped if you have taken on all these different projects and assignments and you feel like nobody else can really replace you. So that could be a limit to one of your winning strategies. Now, if you're looking and doing a lot of research to figure out how to do the next step, a limit to that might be that you're not looking inward. I think too often we have inner wisdom, we have inner knowledge, kind of like that statue analogy, at the core of who you are based on experiences that you've already had. Chances are you have really excellent ideas and ways that you can do things. And yet you might be looking outside of yourself in order to get the right answer, right? Make the right decision. And that can be limiting. Um, Another example might be if you hyper plan. Now, I am a hyper planner, so this is something that I definitely relate to, is if you're really fixed on having a plan in place, right, where you've got the steps and you know that you're going to follow these steps a certain way, what can happen there is that you get so tied to the plan that you may be missing out on opportunities along the way that would present themselves if there was a little bit more white space in your calendar, if things weren't so micromanaged. So you might think about when you go on a vacation, for example, and if every minute the itinerary is planned, you're kind of on this like really high, um, this high intensity trip, and you might miss out on some of the moments that could be a little bit magical, the unexpected. I don't know if you're on vacation, maybe it's somebody playing an instrument in the middle of a train station and you just want to stop and watch it, but you're, running to get onto the train to get to the next city or whatever it is. So just thinking about how that strategy, right, planning, might prevent you from taking on opportunities that might be um, really great, but take you in a different direction from where you thought you wanted to go. Other examples, if you're not taking bigger risks, right? If you're so focused on things being predictable, then you might not be willing to take on risks that are not as predictable, but that could lead to greater outcomes. So these are the questions that I would love for you to be thinking about, right? How are these current strategies limiting you, and where might you be getting stuck? So if you're on a plan, for example, and you're you're not happy with that plan, right? You might look at it and you might look at I love this, not taking bigger risks is totally me. Thank you. Exactly. So this is part of the challenge. And so if you look at risk, for example, and in what ways are you stuck, you might think about, okay, this reluctance, right? This wanting things to be predictable is keeping you stuck. And I see this often in for lawyers in different ways in their practice, right? Sometimes it's being stuck in a job for a long period of time because the risk of doing something different is kind of overwhelming, right? It's the devil you know versus the devil that you don't know. If you're reluctant, for example, to delegate to others because you don't trust that they're going to be able to do the work that you want them to do, they're not able. It's a big time commitment up front in order to get people trained to do the work, etc. That can keep you stuck in a very physical sense, right? There's a bottleneck where you need to be the person to do something, and so you cannot move forward. You may feel stuck in the sense that you've reached a certain level within your current role and you want more, right? You've done the same thing a number of times and it's safe. It feels good. You're excellent at it. And yet there's this desire to do something different. And so here's if you're a hard worker, for example, how might it be stuck? You may not have the time, like if you are working really, really hard, you may not have the time to step back to see how you might be able to do something differently. And so that might give you that feeling of being stuck. So here, the idea is just for you to identify for yourself where you're stuck. And as you do this, no judgment, no judgment. I can tell you there are ways that I am stuck, and I look at this stuckness and I think I'm a coach. I should be able to get out of this stuckness. But sometimes the questions that you're facing are difficult ones, right? You're kind of in this decision fork. Both options are very uncomfortable. And so what we're trying to figure out here is how your current strategies, right? Your current strategies, we're looking at leadership, they're allowing you to reach this certain level, and we're looking at how they may be keeping you from reaching that next level. And that's where we want to focus um, today. Now, what do you go out of your way to avoid? Now, this is another question that I think can be really powerful because it shows us where we may be holding ourselves back. So if you are going out of your way, for example, to avoid being disliked, then what you might find is that you aren't asking for what you need. You are not delivering the true feedback that you would like to be delivering. If you are trying to avoid judgment, then I'm thinking judgment from others, right? Judgment that maybe you're not uh, smart enough or successful enough, or whatever types of judgments might be of concern, then you might avoid doing things that would put you in the spotlight where there's a risk of failure. If you are trying to avoid, I put unemployment in my notes, right? I think too often we think of ourselves and we think, okay, well, either I am where I am or I do this other thing. And if it fails, I'll end up in a van by the river, right? It's like there's like this extreme um, outcome that we fear. And so if we're trying to avoid that insecurity, right, as opposed to security, we might avoid taking risks, doing things, moving forward in a way because we're avoiding that feeling of, well, what if it doesn't work out? We might also avoid uncertainty, right? You might be trying to avoid change, trying to avoid uncertainty. And so you stay doing the same thing time after time, even if you're not necessarily happy doing that. So these are ways of looking at, what is it that you're trying to avoid and how is that holding you back? And this brings us to 2025. And here, what I'd love for you to imagine is what would make 2025 a breakthrough year. Now, this is going to be different for all of us. And if you tune into my podcast episode that will come out on Wednesday next week, I talk about making 2025 a breakthrough year. And I've been thinking a lot about breakthroughs and what that means. And to me, this idea of a breakthrough is that you are, on the one hand, achieving, right? There's this goal that you have, and it's a big goal. And so there's that component of it. And there's also this breaking part, right? The idea that you're breaking through something in order to achieve that goal. So there's an element of overcoming an obstacle in order to get there. And so to make 2025 a breakthrough year, what I would invite you to consider is what could you accomplish that would require you to break through? Another way of looking at this is almost like you are in this space currently, and where you want to go is on the other side of maybe a body of water, say, and you'll be required to cross that body of water. And there will be a point along the way, let's say you're swimming or in a boat, there will be a point along the way where you can neither see the shore that you left, nor can you see the shore that you're going to. And you're going to have to find a way to get to where it is that you're going. And it's that almost unsettled, uncertain feeling. So if you were to aim for a breakthrough year, I'm not saying you have to do this, right? This is a workshop. This is a time for you to explore different possibilities, a time to use your imagination, to be creative. You do not have to do any of these things when we get off the webinar. But for the sake of imagining what that would look like for you, I would invite you to think about what would be a breakthrough year for you. What would that mean for you? Now, it could be that it's a goal like starting your own law firm. It could be a financial goal. It could be changing the way that you practice, having a team that supports you, and being able to delegate a chunk of your work in order to free up some time. It could be having more fun. I know for myself, part of what will make 2025 a breakthrough year for me is I want to put a bit more fun back into my calendar. So think about what a breakthrough year would look like for you. What do you need to accomplish, or what do you want to have happen that would be different for you? So I'm going to, and feel free if you want to put in the chat any of your goals for the new year. What would make that a breakthrough year? But assuming that you've all got that in your notes, what that's going to be for you, we're going to talk about your next level of leadership. So who you need to be in order to have this breakthrough year. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on this slide. Again, I will circulate these slides after the webinar wraps up, so you don't have to write everything down. But this is where we get to imagine you 2025, what leadership is going to look like for you. So the first question is, what new strategies will you need to adopt to reach your goals? Now, one of the ideas that came to mind for me when I was thinking about this is shortcuts. So right now I feel like I'm probably taking the long cut on a few things where I could probably tighten things up. An example that I thought I would share is totally unrelated to the practice of law, but I think it illustrates the point quite well. My family is a large consumer of rice. My husband is Persian. We have rice at almost every meal. I like it because it's super easy. I put it in the rice cooker and I can basically hit a button and forget about it. And we buy 10-pound bags of rice. I buy them at the Persian supermarket. And for years, I have found the task of opening the rice bag. So it's like a canvas bag with a bit of a plastic coating, and it's sewn shut at the top. And every time I opened one of these bags of rice, I was like, oh, this takes forever. I have to take my scissors and like cut out each of the different stitches. And then, it's really messy. There's string everywhere. And I'd been doing this for years, thinking that this was the only way to get into this bag of rice. until the summertime this year when we were out with a bunch of families. And one of the moms who lives in the neighborhood was talking about how she also buys rice from the same Persian supermarket. She said, "Oh, and it's so satisfying because every time I open a fresh bag of rice, I just love being able to cut that string and pull on the thread, and the whole thing unravels. It's so great. It's so satisfying." And I was like, what? Like, I have been spending the last 10 years, opening this bag of rice, but cutting every single stitch. And you're telling me that I could just cut that string in one place and the whole thing would unravel. And sure enough, the next time I bought a bag of rice, I took that bag of rice, I cut the string in one little place, and I tried this. And sure enough, the whole thing just unraveled. I did it last night, which is part of the reason I'm thinking about it. And so it could be that you are spending time in your practice, time outside of your practice, doing something, thinking that this is the way that it needs to be done because it's how you've been doing it for years and because nobody's ever taught you another way to do it. And it may be that this thing doesn't even need to get done. It might be that there's a better way for this thing to get done. And so my invitation for you is to think about what are some ways, right? If you're thinking about strategies, if there are things that you're spending a lot of time on, there may be easier ways. I think AI is a place where there's going to be a lot of room for having things done more quickly. This may already be a part of your practice. I know for me, that's an area that I'm looking at in my practice. How could I use AI to make some things a lot faster? I already use technology to make some things faster. So, what is that for you? More time, right? Strategies that you'll need to adopt to reach your goals. Chances are you're going to need to put more time in your calendar devoted to your strategies, devoted to planning, to find ways to do things differently. Maybe it's time to help bring people on board to help you. It could be taking tasks off your list, right? If you find that you're doing repetitive tasks and they're no longer challenging for you and other people could do them just as well, if not better for you, maybe that is part of your strategy. More direct communication, right? If you find that right now you're not really getting what it is that you want, and it may be that you are struggling to express what you need. I know that this is a challenge sometimes for me when I'm thinking about what I want and I simply don't communicate the request. So that might be part of it. Sometimes it's putting your own needs ahead of other people's needs potentially, or prioritizing them, right? Asking for what you need, investing in what you need. And then finally, it might be setting bigger goals. So if you've been trucking along year after year and you've had similar goals on repeat, and what you might find is you've now reached those goals, right? They were stretch goals 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but now you've reached this new place where that is now just to be expected. It might be that you've reached a plateau. And so part of your new strategy is going to be setting a bigger goal, right? And there's something to be said about creating a stretch goal, one that would require a breakthrough, if you will, because it's something that you're not capable of doing right now, right? It's not, if we go back to that notion of a breakthrough, one of the ways that I would define that is that a breakthrough isn't something that you'll achieve by pressing the gas harder, right? If you think about driving a car and let's say you're driving a standard car and you're in gear two, you can press the gas harder, but you're not going to go faster at a certain point. The engine will just rev more. What you need to do at that point is to shift gears. And then you start afresh, press the gas, you'll go much faster. So here, what I'm thinking about for you is that you may need to set a bigger goal that will take you to that next level. So it's not necessarily more gas, it's doing things differently. So, how are you already prepared to adopt those strategies? Here again, we're looking at that David statue. So you might look at those strategies and maybe the strategy is set a bigger goal and you think, oh, well, I can't do that. I've never done that before. But I'd invite you to go back and look at where you have set bigger goals, right? Where you've set those stretch goals, those impossible goals. I'm going to go through this slide a little bit more quickly, just because I do want us to be able to just a few more slides, and I realize, yes. So I just want to make sure we get through all the questions. So how are you already prepared? What are some of the things that you are already doing, right? Or that have set you up to be able to adopt these new strategies? And then the next question, what will be hard for you? So you might think about if you're trying to carve out time, that's going to be hard, right? Because other people will want your time. You will want to spend your time on those things. If you're trying to get other people on your team to help you, it might be hard to make other people accountable, right? You might feel uncomfortable with that. Um, and it might be hard if, for example, you're accustomed to being really busy and you try to create some white space in your calendar. You might find there's a lot of internal resistance. And what might also be hard is like literally rewiring your brain to help you do the things differently. So if you've got default habits, it might be hard for you to simply change all of that. Now, the next question is what values will come into conflict for you? So often when we're stuck, it's because we have competing values and we're kind of torn between which direction to go in. So examples I've given here, being liked versus being respected. So for example, if you know that if you do the work for somebody, that they're going to be happy with you, it's easy for them, versus if you require them to do that, right? Or if you don't give harsh feedback, um, and that person gets to feel good about themselves because you're not giving them that harsh feedback, then that might be more comfortable for you, but then you also want that feeling of respect. Um, Again, being nice versus holding people to higher standards. So these are some examples where values could come into conflict. I mean, you might also see it, right? If you are a hard worker, right? And so you might value that, and yet you might also value having more time, right? Being able to have the time to spend with family or with yourself or whatever that happens to be. So think about it for you. If you look at the areas where this is going to be hard, what are the values that come into play? Now, this next question, which of your winning strategies will you need to let go of? So here, go back to that list that we started with, and some of the strategies that you might need to let go of um, might be things like working hard, right? Putting work before rest. It might be having multiple goals or working on multiple projects at any given time, right? You might need to be more focused on fewer things. Um, Gathering information, right? If that's one of your winning strategies, maybe we need to let that strategy go or dial that one down in order to lean more into self-trust and the way that you would want to do things. The next question, what will be hard about letting those strategies go? Um, and what will be easy about letting those strategies go? So you might just think about that for yourself, um, and spend a bit of time on that after today's webinar. So the barrier to a breakthrough, here, what we're going to look at is, we've looked now at your current winning strategies, why they're great, how they've supported you. We have looked at the limits of those strategies. We're looking at what you want to accomplish next year. As a leader, what is important to you? We've taken a look at some of the strategies that you'll need to adopt to get there, some of the strategies you might need to let go of. And for the purpose of this slide, the barrier to a breakthrough, what you might find is that there is this unconscious belief that if you were to become that person, that there would be something that you don't like about that person. So the prompts on the slide, we're going to go through these, is I'm going to invite you to imagine that you've reached your goal. So this is now a year forward. It's the end of December 2025. Those things that you put on your list, you've now achieved them. And the questions that I have for you are, number one, how would you describe yourself as a leader? So imagine you've got there, who are you, right? Maybe you're organized, maybe you are more confident, you feel less rushed. Um, Maybe you feel like you're able to step back, let other people support you. Um, Maybe you're more willing to walk away from things that aren't working. So you figure out for yourself what that looks like. You describe that for yourself. So I didn't mean that to be like you figure it out, but describe for yourself what that would look like. Now, the next question here is on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like yourself? Right? So imagine you are in a room with that person. I mean, it's you a year from now. Um, do you like them? Right? And if so, like, what do you like? So let's say you pick a 7. what do you like about them? And it might be that, you respect them. They seem pretty organized. They seem ambitious. They seem successful, whatever it happens to be, right? You feel like you could learn from them. What are the things that you like, right? So scale of 1 to 10. And also, what don't you like, right? Maybe you find that that person is a little bit cool, a little bit controlling. Maybe they're not as warm as you would like. Maybe you find they're a little bit standoffish. Maybe you find they're too ambitious. I mean, in your mind's eye, right? And the reason that I'm asking you to do this exercise is because there may be this unconscious block, right? From you being the leader that you want to be because you don't see yourself as liking that person. And what I'd invite you to do here is to use this as an opportunity for self-exploration, right? It's that almost that going back to that metacognition, thinking about what you're thinking about. What don't you like about that person? And can we make peace with that? And so the next question really follows along that same line. What belief do you have about being that leader that you don't want to acknowledge to yourself, right? And so it might be that you're holding yourself back because you believe that if you achieve those things, if you become that person, maybe you think unconsciously, well, I'll be more isolated. I won't be as fun to be around. I might lose out on some of the relationships and connections that I currently have. I might fail, right? So there are these beliefs that you might be having that are holding you back. So the purpose of this exercise is simply to explore that and to have that awareness, right? Because once we put that out into the open, then we're able to examine that more closely. We're able to deal with it and find a way around it. So you've been working really, really hard. I'm very proud of all of you. We have one last exercise before we wrap up today. So, and I will share before we fully wrap up a few words about a program that I'm offering. It's an opportunity for us to work together, um, which is one last exercise about leadership. And what I'd love for you to do is to define your current leadership style in 3 words. So think about you today, 2024, and what are 3 words that describe you as a leader? So you might be measured, you might be clear, you might be compassionate, you might be um, resourceful. So I'll let you write down 3 words that you would use to describe yourself as a leader. Now, for fun, what I think would be really great would be to take the 3 words that you've chosen and to choose the opposite, right? So if you describe yourself as measured, right? You were a measured leader. What if you were messy, right? What if that was the word? If you were realistic in terms of leadership, what if you were optimistic or really thinking very broadly? If you were, if you described yourself as letting other people figure things out, what if you were really directive? Or what if it was the opposite, right? If you consider yourself really directive now, what if you were letting other people figure it out? Um, if you were, I'm just trying to think about different examples, uh, really measured. For example, what if you were willing to simply go for it? So what would happen? So imagine the opposite of what it is that you just chose. And then finally, the last question here, define your leadership style, sorry, your desired leadership style in 3 words. So taking, for example, your starting point, looking at the opposite and thinking about what we've talked about today, right? Thinking about your goals, thinking about your current winning strategies that you might want to adopt in the future. What are 3 words to describe your desired leadership style? And so I did this exercise. I did all these exercises preparing for today. And the 3 words that I chose, number 1 was proactive, which I would describe as action, like a bias to action toward the best possible outcomes. So it's a combination of a few different ideas, but the word proactive summarized that for me. Empowering is another word that I chose. So I want to empower others by giving them more responsibility and also the authority to exercise that responsibility. And that would remove me from the equation, not entirely, but more so than currently. And then finally, the third word that I chose was focused. So I find right now I have a lot of different projects, which is great, but I want to narrow my focus and also focus more on potential versus limits. So, like many humans and many lawyers, um, we are all wired to see potential negative outcomes. And so yes, we want to acknowledge the negative outcomes, and we also want to spend time looking at the potentially positive outcomes. So when I think about leadership next year, for me, when what I look for, I think those are three words that describe what I'm aiming towards. So I'd love to hear what others. Oh, thank you so much. I've got a beautiful comment here. This is such a thought-provoking and revealing exercise. Beautiful. So this is what I'm hoping for each of you is that just by going through these questions, you are learning more about yourself. Thank you so much for your comments and designing who you want to be as a leader in the new year. So I mentioned that I was going to be sharing about a program that I'm offering. Before that, I also wanted to mention I'm going to share or I'll host another webinar this year, December 19th. It's a Thursday, same time, noon Pacific time. And oh, and thank you so much. I see another wonderful comment. And thank you. You're so welcome. On December 19th, we'll be talking about planning for a breakthrough year in 2025. So if you've been to this webinar, it'll be great because it will set you up for that next webinar in the sense of you've now been thinking about leadership and who you want to be and some of your breakthrough goals. And that next webinar will take you step by step through planning for that next year. So please do join me. I'll send you a link for that as well. But I'd love to tell you about a program that I offer. So I work with lawyers one-to-one. I also run group programs. And one of the group programs is a leadership mastermind and group coaching program for women lawyers. And I have been running a version of this program for 2 years now. And it just never ceases to amaze me, the caliber of amazing women lawyers that I have the privilege of working with. I've worked in groups myself where I've been a participant, and I love the experience. I find it's different from one-to-one coaching. I love both for different reasons. In a group container, it's really amazing because, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for these amazing comments. Thank you, everybody. I'm getting so distracted. And really what I'd love to share with everybody, I'll share a link to the program. In fact, I think I can put that. Let me see if I can put that in the chat. There's a link to the web page. Oh, let's see if I do this. Okay, perfect. There's a link to the web page. So if this is something that interests you, I'd love to hear from you. Basically, it's a 6-month program where we go through 6 different themes. We start with setting a goal. So it would be building on the goal that we set today. We then move into self-concept. So again, who you are as a leader. We would go further into the concepts we were discussing in this webinar. Then we look at obstacles. So every time you set a goal, there's going to be the obstacles that stand in the way, and everyone's obstacles are going to be different. So this is a really great opportunity to learn more about yourself and how to overcome those obstacles. And I see that we're almost at the top of the hour. So if you need to log off, I completely understand. You're welcome to stay for a couple more minutes. I'll just finish talking about the program. And then if there's questions, happy to answer those as well. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we move into obstacles. Then we talk about confidence, authority, and power, how to create more of that in your practice. Then we talk about boundaries. So figuring out how to better protect the priorities that you've chosen for yourself. And then finally, we talk about sustainable success. So it's a wonderful program where you get to be surrounded by like-minded women lawyers who are interested in working on a goal together. You get to see how different women approach very similar problems. It's a great way to prioritize your goal. It gives you that regular touch point. We meet twice a month. We have 2 group calls every month. The first call is usually more of a lesson where I'll teach on the topic. The second call is a discussion where everybody participates and shares their wins and challenges over the course of the month. We do 2 sessions individually. So we'll have 2 one-to-one sessions where we get to focus on your specific goal. And then I also offer 2 additional classes, one on time management and one on transitions, because I find those are topics that come up with a lot of different lawyers. So if you have any questions about that program, please do let me know. Please feel free to reach out to me. I've put a link in the chat for anybody who wants to go to that page. And I could absolutely tell you more about that. I'd love to have you join. We capped the group at 8 women. I find that's a really nice number so that everybody has a chance to participate and get to know each other. So that, my dear friends, is what I have for you today. So in summary, what we've talked about today, then we've talked about leadership in 2024. So we've taken account of your year, the results you've created, your winning strategies, the strengths of those strategies, and some of the limits. We've talked about 2025, what that will take to create a breakthrough year for you. And then finally, we've talked about leadership in 2025, and that is who you must be and who you must become. So if there are any questions, please do put those in the chat. I don't see any questions. So with that, I think we will wrap up for the day. Thank you again, everybody, for joining me here. It's been such a pleasure to have you. If you have any questions, do let me know. I'll send you a recording of today's webinar along with the slides and would love to hear from you and would love to hear how this experience was for you. So thank you again, and I look forward to reconnecting again soon.